Okay, so let us just start with, we have some questions, nice questions today, as usual. So let us see. Question 1. I think we have kind of looked at this before in some way, but let's see. Says, can a human being be reborn as a non-living thing? Example, a stone. So, well, the short answer is no. Because we have to always also keep in mind how we define words, what do they mean? So birth and death, for example, when we use the terms birth and death, it refers to sentient beings, So living being, who's born? Someone who's born and then the person lives. We are born, we live, and then when we die, we no longer are alive, The body is born at a given time, and then it lives. It is sentient, It has certain qualities that are manifest in it. And then when those qualities are no longer manifest in it, then we say it is dead, It is not sentient anymore. So there is something else that is, what is it? So if there is that element, that aspect is not there in the object, then we call it not alive, If you look at a stone, do we say a stone is dead? Does a stone die? Does a stone die? Is it alive? Or does it become alive? Does it die? So we don't, living and death, birth, these are terms that are not used when there is no consciousness. What we call, something else has to be there in an object, An object itself, itself is inert, really speaking. So an object that is perceived. Okay. Then the next question, what do you mean by an object? Okay. So now, well, you can use the word object also differently. Something which I perceived is an object of my perception. Okay. So then again, you have to be very careful. So when I say an object, it can be an object of my perception. So next question is, what kind of perception are you talking about? Because there are different types of perception. So there is external perception and there is internal perception. So now, external perception has to do with sense organs. So in sense organ, I see things, I hear things, I smell things. So I smell something. Is that, what is it that I smell? What I smell is an object of my perception. That's the smell. The smell is the object of my perception. I may not see the object. The object may be, many times I just smell something, some kind of a fragrance, some kind of a, smell I don't like. So a smell is there, but the object is not visible to me. It's not that the object is not there. Object is there. That's why I smell it. The fragrance is there, but the is not available for perception. Same thing with, so each perception, each organ is like that. So when I say something is an object, it's an object of my perception. But there again, there are internal perceptions too. So my feelings, for example, is feeling an object or is it not an object? Well, I can say feeling is an object because it's not an object of external perception, but it is an object of my internal perception. I perceive. So now I'm using these words in different ways. Object, perception, internal, external, all these things. So they have specific meanings. I can use it in a very specific way, or I can use it in a broader way, Okay, so these are all true for everything. That's the nature of language and the nature of communication and conversation and so on. So when we say human being, when we say anything exists, okay. Something exists or something doesn't exist. Now, that whether it exists or doesn't exist, what does that depend on? Does it depend on birth and death? Or does it depend on perception? Or does it depend on... So, this is where how we use the words now. Okay. So when I say object, an inert object, so an inert object lacks certain qualities. It lacks sentiency. Doesn't have awareness, awareness of what? Awareness of its environment. For example, a tree is sentient. Okay. A tree is sentient. So the leaves are sentient. It has an awareness of its environment. They turn towards the sun, for example. So a leaf perceives light. Okay. It perceives light, therefore it turns towards light. So now, is leaf alive or is it dead? Well, it is alive. It is alive because it perceives something. It is conscious of something. It responds to something, to another object. Okay. One day it doesn't respond. It falls from the tree, or it on the tree, maybe it doesn't respond, and so then it drops, and then we say, well, it is dead. Okay. So even a leaf can be born. The leaf is born in time, then it dies in time, and in between it is alive. So that is what we call as sentiency. Those things you don't, is a stone alive like that? No. Stone is not conscious of its environment. It is then, however, stone can become a powder. Okay. Well, it becomes a powder, but that it doesn't become a powder because of some consciousness. It becomes a powder because so other elements interacts with other elements, and that make it changes form. Okay. So a stone may change its form. Okay. Because it is matter. Matter changes form because of other matter. Because of other matter. If it is sitting, if there's no other matter, if the stone is in the space, then it's a whole different story. It doesn't have the wind, it doesn't have all these kinds of things, so it may not change the form, or even if it changes the form, it will be a very, very, very long time, perhaps subjects to other elements. It will decay. It will be radioactivity decays. So, maybe even in space it decays. So, not by wind it decays. So, like that. So, these are all inert objects to which are not, they don't have that awareness, that upadhi, that thing is not there, that makes it aware. So, an inert object can have that or need not have that. That is, when it has it, we call it alive. It is sentient. So birth and death belong to that. Okay. So any sentient being, whether it is in the form of a human body itself also. So when scripture talks about life and death and all, they have all this in mind. So they refer to certain specific things, So the question always is, so this is one, inert and sentient. This is our definition, the way we understand it. Now the other thing is, what is the reality? Scripture also talks of realities. The reality, what do you mean by that? The truth of something. Is it, when we say something is real or not real? So $2 bill, is it real or is it not real? Is it real or is it not real? Okay, the question. So you get a $2 bill or a $3 bill. Let us say, make it more interesting. There's a $3 bill you get. Is it? Then you look at it and say, "Oh, this is not real. This is not real." What do you mean by it is not real? It's real. It's there. Somebody printed it. Your other bill, $1 bill, you have also somebody printed it, and this one also somebody printed it. Both piece of paper, we both are there. They are real. That's, you're perceiving it. No. It has no value. But there is no such thing. It doesn't really exist. But it appears like that. But it has no reality. There is no truth about it. There is no truth about it. It is not what it is meant to be. All different kinds of things you can say. So the reality of an object or the truth of an object is something different from the perception of an object. I'm seeing the $3 note just as I'm seeing the $1 note or the $10 note. But then one is real, one is not real, one is true, one is false, one is fake. One is fake. So scripture also gets into these issues when it comes to the world, when it comes to oneself. So am I what I seem I am? What is this? What is the truth of me? Am I really born? If I'm born, then was I there before I was born? Am I going to be there after I cease to be? I was not there before. I will not be there later. In between, I am there. Am I really there? These are all the fundamental questions that people have. Any thinking person has that. Tree doesn't have those questions. Tree is born, it exists for a while, and it dies also. Human being is also born, exists for a while, and dies. But we have these kinds of questions which we call fundamental questions because they are essential to our feeling of contentment. They are natural. We seek answers to this. We don't seek answers to see. What do we seek answers for in life? We usually seek answers for things we don't know. Correct? We know and we don't know. If you totally don't know something, you don't know. Then there's no question of wanting to know. Then there are certain things which you know and you don't know. In the sense, you come to know, you hear about it, but you don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. So then now you want to know. Your curiosity. So if I hear something about it, now I want to know. Then there are certain other questions that I want to know because of observation. My own thinking. I see something which I never saw before, and I want to know what it is. I think of myself. I look at myself. There are internal perceptions. I look at my thinking. I look at my feelings. And then I want to know, what is this? I want an explanation. We seek a meaning, for things. So this is at a different level. Human being has certain capacities which are different. Different beings have different kinds of capacities, in terms of perception and in terms of also inner cognitive. Human being is the most evolved that way. So we have these kinds of questions and we start defining things. So when scripture also addresses this issue of realities, it talks about what is the reality of this body. What is the reality of any object? Physics. Physics goes into that. Science, all sciences are like that. Inquiry, wanting to know. So the stone, does it really exist as it is perceived? Does anything exist as it is perceived? Or it has something else also? And what is its essential nature? Essential is nature means that which is unchangeable. Is changing always the only thing? Or there is also something which changes? There's a difference. There's a difference. So if there's something that changes, so that what is that thing? When I say something changes, does that thing remain as the thing? Does it retain certain qualities and other qualities change? So that means is there something which is changeless? And is there something which is changing? These two seem opposite, So is the changing thing that has something which changes or is changeless? Or is the changeless thing that something that really keeps changing, So these are all the kinds of questions that human being has in terms of reality of an object, and which includes me, what is the truth of myself? Am I a changing entity? Am I a changeless entity? If I'm changing, why do I appear to be changeless? Or do I appear to be changed? So there are certain things, constants, all these kinds of answers are addressed in the scripture, in the big category of who am I? Who am I? What am I? You know, seeking to know oneself, self-reflection, all this. So, where all those capacities, that is what the life life is centered on. So here, when I say, can a human being, when we say, it is a form of life. It is sentient, something which is sentient. So if something which is sentient, can it be born as something which is, can it manifest as the insentient? Can manifest as anything. A dream. Is a dream sentient or insentient? So there is, in a dream, there are living beings. In a dream, there are inert things, inert objects. Dream itself, is it real? Or is it sentient, or is it inert? The dream. So if you say dream essentially is inert, it is just inert, like an object, then how come I'm seeing all these living beings in the dream? So then so the scriptures define that also. They say, well, anything that is objectified, anything that is perceived, anything that is an object of your perception, it may be external perception or internal perception, is inert. Yad drishyam tad jadam. It says like that. And the one to whom all these perceptions take place, in what they take place, is what we call as the subject, what we know as the subject, what we recognize as the subject. And that is not inert. Because there are two things in a living being. There is that which is perceived, and that which perceives, the consciousness, that which is even behind the perceiver. So that is something which is changeless. So that is what the scripture points out and leads one, and how to recognize that in oneself. So getting back to this question, so now we can see, when we say birth, rebirth, death, all these things, they are from a reference standpoint. We are really talking about change. Birth and death can be just change, but it's not simple change, because inert objects also change. They transform. We call it transformation. They transfer into their what transforms? What transforms? Gold transforms from a brick, you know, not clay brick. From a gold brick, it transforms into an ornament that you wear, and then it transforms into another ornament. You recycle them. So it was a chain before, then from the chain you make a ring, from the ring you make something else. So those are transformations. Does it change or does it not change? Well, it does change, but it also is changeless in the sense, so it changes its form, it changes its function, it may change its value, but it is still always gold. Gold is gold. Gold doesn't change, but its form and function, value changes. So that is how we understand that. So human being also, this is something that doesn't change, which is not, that is what we call, that is not subject to then birth and death. Birth and death. So, and that is not there in a stone. It's not there in a stone. Even though stone changes, it changes its form, it changes its function, but it doesn't have that sentiency in it. No, it's not alive. There is no birth for it. There is no death for it, even though there is change brought about by other external factors. Okay. So I think that's clear. Okay. So we are not reborn as some inert objects. Also, there's another whole level of understanding, which is any perception is a perception, Inert objects are perceptions. The same object by another being is perceived differently. Form colors, for example. All beings don't perceive colors the same way. Certain even human beings don't. Some people, they call them colorblind. So perceptions have their own limitations. So this means, is that real, or for that person there's certain colors are not real? They don't exist. So all objects, all things that are inert, they're all perceptions, but perceptions in themselves have a certain limited reality, and are relative. Okay, so that much is enough. Let's go on to the next one. Do animals have souls? Example, dogs and cats. Anybody, any animal. We are also animals. We are also animals. We are not, So, the human, whether it's a human being, how are we different from others? Other animals. All animals are animals. They have certain characteristics that define them, Yeah. Animal is not only the one who talks. They communicate. All animals communicate in some form or the other, All animals respond. All animals perceive. So to different degrees, humans have certain capacities, Our bodies and all have certain characteristics, certain capacities. So thinking, cognition, feelings, all that. But they are different. For different animals, they are different. When you look at it that way, what defines something is whether one is alive or not. All animals are alive. They are sentient. They are conscious. They have this consciousness, Okay, that all we know. We recognize that. Then what do you mean by a soul? You say, do animals have souls? Well, you do. How are you going to define this word soul? It depends. Soul obviously doesn't refer to the body. Just the body, the object of perception. Because stone is also an object of perception. We don't call a stone an animal. Okay. So we are referring to certain other characteristics, even when you say the word animal. Any sentient being. So the soul word refers to that which is, he's saying, is defined as a part of a human being that is not the material, It's not the concrete material. And it is also, another characteristic is regarded as immortal. So this is the definition of soul. Okay. I'm not saying Atma and all that. Keep in mind. The English word soul, when they say, they refer to something which is not material, tangible. Tangible means available for perceptions, sense organs, But it is not available for all of that. Yet it is there. But all that is tangible is subject to time. Soul is something which is not subject to time. That's what we call as immortal. Immortal means there is no birth and death. Mortality generally refers to death. But death involves birth also. Death of what? The only thing that dies is the thing that is born. Correct? That which is not born cannot die. Only that which is born dies. But both is reference to time. You know. So when we say immortal, really speaking, is something which is not subject to death, also not subject to birth. In other words, it is not subject to change in time. That is what is called as immortal. Soul. Soul is immortal and soul is not material. Do animals have that? Well, human beings have that. Even though they are animals, we have that. Why should the other animals not have it? How do we know that they don't have it? We don't know ourselves what the soul is in ourselves. Okay? And then how do we say the other animal doesn't have? We are also an animal with some extra features, like a luxury car. But then the other animals also, they also, if this immortal thing that is inside is what makes things sentient and alive, then that has to be there in the animals also. The same, they are also sentient, they are also alive, they also respond. Minus, they are not luxury car. They may not have certain special things, features, that we have. So, according to us, animals have a soul. Some people, religions say they don't have a soul. It's more for convenience. Then that means animals we can be. If we have respect for life, which we do, all human beings have. They have respect for life. That's why you don't destroy each other. Otherwise, we'll find enough reasons to destroy each other, starting from the way you think. People have reasons to destroy you just because you think differently from the way they think, and they don't like that. You have to think like them. So, but we don't do that. Some people do that, but we don't. You're not supposed to do that. We don't do that by nature for our own protection also. Even animals don't go about destroying each other. Their own kind, They won't just simply destroy each other like that. So, what I'm saying is this sentiency, if I respect, that means I respect life. Because it's valuable. It's the most valuable thing for oneself. And so it's true for every person, for every living being. Every living being values their life. That's why they don't want to die. Even an animal doesn't want to die. So therefore, we have that. So if animals have soul, that means I have to have that. But if I don't want to have that, I can say, okay, well, with human beings, it's okay because it is my own survival is at stake. But anyone who is subhuman, their survival is not my priority. I can kill them. I can eat them. You can do so many things with animals, We can treat them badly. So then, but then if they have a soul, I can't do that. So then they don't have soul. Only human beings have soul. Animals don't have soul. But they are conscious and sentient and responsive and everything else. But they don't have a soul. They don't have anything that is immortal, in other words. So they're just a body. So which can be consumed, as for us, given, put there, so that, we are not hungry. Otherwise, there is no other reason to say somebody doesn't have a soul. What other reason can you have? And same thing with human beings also. Then transfer that to human beings. Some human beings are not really, they are subhuman. They're subhuman. So all those things, those are all human frailties that get translated into all this wrong thinking, wrongful thinking. But human beings, animals are sentient beings. If we have respect for life, then we have respect for all life, anything that has life. So you don't unnecessarily go about destroying, even just plucking a leaf just because you pass by a tree. People do that, They pass by a tree and there's a branch hanging down and simply pluck a leaf. And what do you do with it? Pluck it and throw it, So people who have that sensitivity won't do that. So animals also have souls, the way we understand it and the way we define what soul is, Yeah. Okay, so here, okay, it is said, let's see. When a person performing worship knows all the stipulations but does not follow them, then there is no Shraddha. When we have religious functions at home and invite priests to conduct the prayers, we have noticed that sometimes their full attention is not on the prayers and that they are conducting. And also some mantras sound like they have been cut short. Does this mean that prayers conducted have no Shraddha and do not have value? See, let's see, there are different questions here. Shraddha doesn't, prayers don't have Shraddha or no Shraddha, Shraddha, presence or absence of Shraddha is with reference to the person, Shraddha means faith. So a person, to the extent a person has faith in something. Shraddha, when we use specifically in our understanding, Shraddha is, you can say, faith, but faith which comes with understanding also. Okay. The understanding may not be there initially, but the expectation is that it is always accompanied by understanding, because one can have faith in something which is also incorrect, So you can't just use the word faith. Faith is, okay, is it right? Do I believe in something or not believe? So simple belief is not faith the way we understand it. It is a belief which is backed by some reasoning and understanding. Okay. Let us take pending. Either it is there or it is going to be there. At some point is the expectation. So pending understanding, I believe certain things. And so that is called, that can be faith. The initial stages of faith. Then later on, that faith gets validated by one's own understanding and thinking and clarity and resolution of doubts and other forms of validation. Okay? Then that faith becomes stronger. So that is how we understand Shraddha. Now, for me to even perform prayers, why do we even perform a prayer? Why do we do anything? Why do we recite a prayer? Why do we chant? Because we are expecting to get something out of it. Otherwise, why do we do anything in life? Because we expect to get some result. So therefore, I perform a prayer. So there is some Shraddha to begin with, some faith. And the minimum faith is that this prayer is going to give me some result which I seek. It can be anything. It can be in the form of an object. It can be in the form of something inside, some state of mind. It can be just in the form of benefiting me or somebody else also. It can be for various reasons. But there is some expectation. At least minimum is whatever is prayers are supposed to be good for me. And so I'm doing something and which will be good for me. At least that much is all faith only. Shraddha. So definitely when we perform a prayer, we have some Shraddha is there. Whether I understand it fully or not. Now there are certain prayers that we perform, we do ourselves, coming from our own mind. And then there are certain prayers which are traditional, which we have learned. So the prayers are different forms of expression, whether it is communication, whether it is verbal, whether it is mental, whether it is performing things, doing actions, pujas, all these things. They're all different forms of expression and communication with the divine. So in the puja also, then there are stipulations. What's the stipulation? Is what the scriptures tell, how a prayer should be done, or how a particular prayer is performed. If it involves performing things, then there are certain traditional stipulations based on tradition, based on scripture. So now, if I know them, I just do them. If I don't know them, then we get a priest. Now, does the priest have Shraddha or not? Generally, if you don't have Shraddha, you're not going to become a priest. There are a lot of other things to do in life to be a priest. But let us say somebody ends up having no faith. So in order for a prayer to be effective, who should have Shraddha? Obviously, the prayer doesn't have, it's not the prayer that is Shraddha. Somebody has Shraddha in the prayer. Both the priest, not only the priest, it's not enough for the priest to have Shraddha. Is the one for the whom the priest is a proxy. Priest is not performing a prayer for their own sake. The priest is performing the prayer for the sake of the person, as a proxy to the person. Because the person doesn't know all the stipulations that are there and how to perform a particular type of prayer. You don't get a priest just to get up in the morning and turn the lamp on and say a prayer. We said prayers before we started the class. We didn't invite a priest to do that. We said it. But if I want to do a puja in the house and I don't know how to do it, then I call a priest. So the priest officiates. He's called as a ritvik or a purohit. But the one who performs the prayer is the yajamana, who takes the sankalpam, is the one who's actually performing the prayer. So the priest does it on behalf of you. And then tells you to do certain things which you can do. Certain things which you can't do, the priest will do on your behalf. The mantras that you cannot recite, the priest will recite on your behalf. Or the priest will make you recite at least the simple ones. Really speaking, the priest can make you recite the whole thing. which is not, they do that. People who know prayers and language, they will recite along with the priest, So, all these things are there in a puja. So now the Yajamana also has to have faith, the one who's actually doing the puja. Now, suppose the priest doesn't have as much faith as the person who's performing the puja. Really speaking, the result of a prayer depends on the faith of the one who performs it. Okay, got to keep that in mind. Always. Priests don't perform prayers. Priests come and officiate, and they are your proxies. Sometimes you may ask the priest to do something in the temple for you, and you're not even there. The priest acts as a proxy on your behalf, but it is still you are the one for whom the prayer is being performed. So we are keeping that in mind. Really speaking, suppose a priest is not that attentive. But the performer, the Yajamana, has full faith. He has full faith that what you have faith that the priest is doing all the right things. Suppose they don't do the wrong, or they don't know, or they may know, but they forget. We're all human beings. Suppose the priest forgot few steps. But it is your faith that gives the result of the prayer. Suppose the Yajamana has no faith at all. Happens also at home. So as a couple, one wants to do the prayer. There's a lot of faith. The other one doesn't have. I don't believe in all these things. So the other one does the prayer now. This one doesn't believe in anything. Who's going to get the result of the prayer? Who's going to get the result? So what happens is the one who actually has faith and performs the prayers will get the results. But usually, in case of a couple, they are good. So they perform for the other one also. They include them. Even though the person doesn't have any faith, they will still include them in their prayer. Then that becomes their prayer. So, oh Bhagavan, you bless me. And along with him, you also bless the other one, other half, who doesn't have any faith. So this one gets all the punyam, and the little bit goes to the other one also, even though they don't have faith. Because in response to this person's prayer. Okay. But priests, whatever it is not the priest's Shraddha. It is the Shraddha of the Yajamana that is more important, Cutting short. The other thing about cutting short, one important thing we have to keep in mind. The priests generally don't cut short. They have no need to. They know the prayer. This is how it is done. Usually what happens, more often than not, so, prayer, suppose a priest comes and says, oh, I want to do this Satyanarayan. He'll say, this prayer takes 3 hours. First, because the person asks, how long will it take? Is one of the first questions they ask. I want to perform this prayer in the house. Prayer say, okay, priest says, okay, I'll come. Next question is, how long will it take? And the priest will say, it will take 2 hours. 2 hours, can you cut it down? No, cut it down. Immediately. Suppose he says 4 hours, they want to cut down. Suppose he said half an hour, they want to cut down. Whatever it is, it's always shorter than what the priest says. Wedding is going to take 3 hours. No, can you just do half an hour wedding? 3 hours if the two of you can't sit together. Whole life, how are you going to sit together? You know? Okay. So, so it's not always the priest who cuts it short, really speaking. So the people want to cut it short. So therefore, we have shorter versions, we have elaborate versions. So many times when the priests, they know there are in their stipulations also, there are certain things which are essential. There are certain things which can be elaborated. So usually what they will do is they will try to cut down on things which people, if suppose somebody says, it's not always wrong. Suppose you say, no, 3 hours is too much, can 1 hour, I don't want so elaborate. Then we say, no, need not be so elaborate. It can be little, do the shorter version. So then it's not wrong. But that's why we have Panchopachara Puja, Shodashopachara Puja, different types of pujas are there, and there's a lot of room also. You can do 3 stutis, or you can do 5 stutis, or you can do, you can elaborate, so priests know those things. So they can do that. Sometimes they will do that, So, and then it's not like they're doing something wrong, or it won't be effective. That's about Shraddha, Then one more question is there. About Dhanam. Is Dhanam a religious discipline in Hinduism? Then here it gives a comparison. In Christianity and Islam, 10% of their income is stipulated to be given. Which is better? Which is better? So Dhanam, of course, is religious discipline. Yeah. Any discipline, when it involves one's growth, spiritual growth, that's what a religious discipline is. The purpose. The purpose of, religion. What do you mean by discipline? Human beings. Discipline only applies to human beings. Yeah. So because we have free will, choice, we can do things, we need not do things. All that is there. So discipline is then there are different, when it refers to the different disciplines like exercise, diet. These are all disciplines. When I follow certain rules. For what purpose do I do that? For my well-being. Physical well-being, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being. So when it comes to maturity and spiritual well-being, the things that I do that are imposed because choice is there, so is imposed. Those we call as religious disciplines that have some scriptural mandates. They may have a mandate or it may have a recommendation. Do scriptures mandate certain things? You should do. Who mandates? Who mandates? God, Bhagavan mandates, or it is a people mandate? Who decided that certain things should be done, should not be done? Really speaking, from Bhagavan's standpoint, the way we understand, if Bhagavan wanted something to be absolutely mandatory, should I breathe or should I not breathe? Is breathing a spiritual discipline? Pranayama is a spiritual discipline. Is breathing a spiritual discipline? Or is breathing a discipline? Breathing is not a discipline. Even though it's necessary for one's well-being, it's necessary for one's life, it's necessary for one's survival. But it's not a discipline. Bhagavan wanted us to breathe. So what did Bhagavan do? He didn't put a rule in the scripture, you all should breathe. Mandatory. He made it such that it happens, whether you want it or not. It stops when you want it or not. Okay. Okay. So Bhagavan doesn't need to mandate anything. If something is absolutely necessary, then it will be inherent. Eating, breathing. But mandates are there. But mandates are there also only for human beings, not for animals. Not for animals. This is a big topic. So animals don't have rules. They don't have scripture. In fact, they don't need scripture. Because like everything is programmed by the Almighty. But we have this unique faculty of free will, of choice. So we end up doing things which are not good for us, things which are good for us, our well-being. So scripture says certain things. Scriptural disciplines are also subject to free will. Also subject to free will. That's why people follow them or don't follow them. That's why we have so many different religions. There's so many different interpretations, so many different rules, disagreements, and conflicts and quarrels. All because of free will. So here Dhanam, if Bhagavan wanted everybody should give donation, okay, then he'll make a discipline. Or is it something which was decided locally by whoever? Who decides? Whoever is in charge, or who puts themselves in charge, decides. Like we do. Human beings do that all the time. You put tax, so much tax, sales tax, this tax, that tax. So Bhagavan also put a tax. So much percentage of your income, you have to give charity. So immediately human being, all these questions come to our mind. I have to give 5%, 10%, whatever, 15%. So this, is it on gross income or is it on net income? First question. How do I know how much is that? So if I have to give 5%, this is 5% of what? We know that there's a difference. What is my salary? And then all the taxes and all that they take, half of which goes away. Then baki half I get for myself. So should my 5% be on what my paycheck says originally, or should that be what I get in my hand? I don't know. I don't know what the rule says, honestly. But in either way, this question is there in my mind. Now, so many questions are there. Does it depend on how much one can afford? How much one can afford. So two people have the same salary. One person has one child or no children. Another person has 6 children. Should both be paying the 10%? Or there will be adjustment? So who decides all this? My point is, who decides? How does one decide? Who decides? So Dhanam is really, it's a recommendation, okay? To give, to share with others. Who decides? The one who shares. You decide. You have to decide. You have to decide. In order to decide, you need to have maturity. You have to know who to give, how much to give, when to give, to whom to give. So either you decide or I tell you, you give me and I'll decide for you. Correct? Suppose I come in the middle. It's very difficult to decide all these things. So you give me 10% of whatever you have, and I will decide who deserves, who doesn't. I will decide what to do with that money. So that's also, it suits certain people. Because then you don't have to sit and think. I'm giving to the right person, I'm giving to the wrong person, I'm doing this. It makes it easy, Like a tax. Government doesn't care, how they spend the money. If you want the same things, you will not waste money. But their value system is not the same as yours. But they say you give me this much tax and then I will spend. They so much money gets wasted. Okay. You should get wasted. So this person comes in between and takes on the government job and says, you give me this much and then it doesn't matter how many children you have. So all these kinds of things are there. Dhanam has to come from within, which requires maturity, growth, understanding, and caring also. I have to care enough to know, to understand who I'm giving, for what purpose, and where, and how much. So early on it's one thing to tell children, who can't think all this. So say, okay, you know what you give is, I gave you 10 rupees. I think 1 rupee you should share with others. 9 rupees you spend on yourself. Like that all you teach. But when they grow older, that's not how you do it. So there are a lot of issues in this. Should it be like that? Or should it be part of one's own growth process, where a person learns to share, and it comes from whether they feel they want to give 5% or 20%. That's not the issue. I know people who can't afford, and then they feel compelled to give 10%. I've heard there are groups, even among Hindus. Now they're also starting to say that, even though scriptures never says that anywhere, But they'll say, all these people, they have 10% and all this, we should be like that. Everybody should give charity, 10%. And they also tell all the devotees, 10% you have to give. And they give. And then I know people who are really poor, they don't make much money. They have a lot of responsibilities. But if they don't give, then they get ostracized by the group. So dhanam should not be accompanied by pressure and guilt and coercion and all those kinds of things. Some places you go to the temple, go to the house of worship. Then they will have fundraiser. Then they shut the doors, they won't let you leave. And then the whole community ostracizes you. Nobody sits and asks what responsibilities you have. Are you in a good place? Not everybody gets a fixed salary. Some people have money sometimes they don't have money. All that nobody sits and asks. But you get ostracized. So all those things are not healthy for one's growth. So dhanam has to be understood as something. It is definitely a value. A value is something that needs to be understood, that should help one grow spiritually, emotionally. And of course, dhanam is a very big value in Hindu tradition also. But there is no this kind of micromanagement. Scripture doesn't need to do that. These are all things done by people for their own reasons. Sometimes, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for with good intention, but sometimes, also they come with their own problems. So anyway, so Shraddhaya Deyam, Shraddhaya Deyam, Shriya Deyam, Biya Deyam. Like that, many things that go along with giving to keep in mind. And then it is a person's value and understanding, and capacity and all that. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.